Good afternoon. Just a few minutes past 1 o'clock, and we will call this TACIR Commission meeting to order. I'm grateful for everyone being here. We have now a quorum plus one, and we will begin momentarily. But before we begin, I wanted to have a quick word of wonderful news from our chairman, Senator Yeager, who is vacationing and doing incredibly well, finished his treatments, rang the bell, and wants to thank everyone for their care and concern and good wishes. But he is in good hands and reported to me moments ago enjoying 70-degree weather in Florida. So, Chairman, if you're listening, we wish we were with you. Thanks for that moment of announcement on behalf of the chairman. Director Lippard. Looks like tab 1, minutes of the September meeting. Are there any changes, updates, or can we approve those minutes as submitted?
You need a motion.
I think we can do just acclamation. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those minutes will be entered. Thank you. Dr. Lippard, tab 2, commission and staff update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So first of all, I want to start with saying how happy we've been to have Deputy Commissioner Denise Thomas on the commission, but we're even more happy now that she's Commissioner Denise Thomas. And so we just wanted to congratulate the Commissioner on her recent promotion. Next, kind of sad news, we're saying goodbye to two of our members today. Mayors Tom Bickers and Mayor Jill Holland terms are ending. And I just want to say how much we're going to miss. Mayor Holland is with us today, and we do have a certificate for the mayor that we're going to be presenting momentarily, and another for Mayor Bickers that we'll be sending to him. But I just want to say how much we're going to miss both mayors and their insightful comments and questions during our meeting. Some of the most probing questions on no slight to our other mayors. But just want to thank you so much for your service on the commission. And you want to do the
Certainly.
Okay.
We have an official. Mayor Holland, I wish the real chairman were here to present this to you. We'll come down here if you'll join us at the Mayor Holland, in recognition of your 3-year outstanding service and intensity advisory commission. The insight that you bring this commission. Thank you
I'll
for being
certainly
here.
miss you. Thank you.
Be well.
Thank you so much.
There you are.
Thank you.
I'm going to put you in the middle for this picture.
Okay. Oh, okay.
The rose between two thorns.
No.
Ready? On 3. 1, 2, 3.
Can we Photoshop Ken Yeager into that?
Let's do.
I think you want to say some comments.
Yes, yes, thank you. This is to the TACIR Commission and staff. I am so grateful for the opportunity to have served as a member of the TACIR Commission for the past few years. The dedicated, hardworking staff always provided the highest level of quality research, and I will be forever grateful for their fair and thoroughly researched examination of the proposed policies and issues. Dr. Lippard, April, and the entire staff were always available to answer our questions and respond to concerns we might have. Each has been respectful, pleasant, and extremely helpful in assisting and supporting the TACIR Commission members. I continue to be impressed and in awe of the intellect and knowledge of the staff and hours of examination and investigation that back up each presentation. This is truly a think tank treasure that the state of Tennessee reaps the benefits of the results. I am so honored to have served alongside the respected and highly knowledgeable commission members. Each has respectfully demonstrated through questions, opinions, and sometimes lively debates that his or her interests lie in what is best for the whole. I have thoroughly enjoyed the discussions and perspectives from each of the TACIR representatives of our state and local governments. This has helped us to become more knowledgeable and see with new eyes differing viewpoints, which helped us to formulate resolutions improving the quality of our government and lives of our citizens. I will always be thankful for the opportunity to have served alongside the esteemed and respected members of the TACIR Commission and staff. Thank you for all I have learned from you, and thank you for the decisions you continue to make which best serve our great state. May God bless each of you, and I wish you all joy, peace, and much good health in 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Holland. Director Lippert.
Thank you, Mayor. So moving on to our staff update, two announcements on staff updates. First is on December 1st, Research Manager Jennifer Berry graduated from the Tennessee Government Management Institute. This is the 2-week resident program that provides an opportunity for academic study, learning, and practical management skills and cross-agency networking to enhance individual skills. So it's a pretty robust training program, and it's a great accomplishment on Jennifer's part to complete that. Jennifer, congratulations. And then on December 6th, so just also very recently, Web Development and Publications Manager Teresa Gibson graduated from Lead Tennessee, which is a year-long course that meets 12 times throughout the year, once a month, to provide leaders with core competencies. And it's also a very thorough training program, and I had the opportunity to attend the graduation ceremonies for both of these ones. Was very impressed with what their fellow students had to say about the program. And as a lead graduate myself, I especially congratulate Teresa on that accomplishment. Teresa?
Thank you, Director, and congratulations to those two, and thanks for the comments, Mayor Holland, as well. It takes us to tab number 3, which is the post-award and implementation process for state grants. This is a final report for approval, so we will be having a vote at the end, but we would like to hear from Mr. Chris Belden. Mr. Belden?
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Today I will present the final Commission report on the post-award and implementation process for state grants for your approval. The report was prepared in response to a request from Chairman Yeager, which directed staff to review the post-award and implementation processes for state-administered grants to local governments and identify any changes warranted to streamline these processes so that grants may be more effectively utilized. In response to concerns raised by Commission members at the September meeting, staff have included additional information from state agencies regarding considerations that would need to be taken into account before transitioning to a single statewide grant management system, or GMS. A GMS is a software system that allows for the end-to-end management of grant programs and projects. Those additions are highlighted and can be found on pages 41 and 42 of the report. In addition, in response to a member request, staff reached out to nonprofits to understand their experiences with state grants. Staff found the experiences that nonprofits reported are similar to those reported by local governments, with some of the nonprofits' main concerns being adequate training, open communication, and the amount of time it takes to get reimbursed. Staff have also strengthened the language of the report's 4 recommendations based on feedback from Commission members at the September meeting, which can be found on pages 5 and 6. The report makes 2 recommendations for specific changes to state processes. First, the Commission recommends that the state require agencies to use a single statewide grant management system to promote a more uniform, user-friendly experience across agencies for grantees, with exceptions provided for agencies that can demonstrate the system won't support functions necessary for their grant programs. And second, it recommends that state agencies accept Title VI training provided by other agencies when verifying compliance with federal and state law, unless they can demonstrate other agencies' trainings are inadequate for their programs, to eliminate the need for grantees to take multiple trainings when they have grants with multiple agencies. And the report also makes two general recommendations to promote good stewardship of grant funds through identification and adoption of best practices. First, the Commission recommends that state agencies regularly convene grant advisory boards made up of representatives for local governments and the entities that assist them with carrying out grant projects, similar to the boards already established by the Department of Economic and Community Development and other agencies, to solicit feedback for improving grant requirements and processes, and to prioritize issues of importance to grantees, for example, when considering new programmatic agreements with federal partners. And second, it recommends that the state consider establishing an interagency working group for sharing lessons learned from agencies' efforts to improve grant requirements and processes to promote the adoption of best practices across grant programs. This concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I ask for your approval of the report.
Thank you, Mr. Belden, for that report. And are there any questions or comments from members of the commission? Senator Yarbrough?
Thank you. So I appreciate the work that was done on this, and a lot of the report deals with the grant management system software. And Mr. Chair, I would like to, I don't want anybody to get confused about what we're recommending here. I think we are sort of recommending that everybody use the same technology here so that we have a system that works the same way for everyone. And that's, I think, what the report recommends. I don't want anybody to misread that we're, to overread what this says. And so, I would like to, recommend and consider moving to change this to grant management system software in the first bulleted recommendation.
Simply adding the word software
Just
after.
adding the word software there. Just because, throughout the report, we refer to it as GMS. And I think in that context, we know that we're talking about software, but I think if you're reading the full text recommendation, that might not be as clear. So I would, if that's acceptable to people, I would like to make that motion.
Senator, would you like to make the motion that you are accepting the report with that verbal amendment?
Yes, I will make that.
That is a proper motion. And is it a second from Chairman Williams? All right, so we have a motion as verbally amended. We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We accept the report as amended. Thank you, Mr. Belden.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That takes us to tab number 4, which is Public Chapter 503, Acts of 2021, Childhood Obesity. It's the final report for approval from Mr. David Lewis. Mr. Lewis, we appreciate you being here and look forward to hearing your final report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As noted, this report was prepared in response to Public Chapter 503 Acts of 2021, which directed the Commission to perform a comprehensive evaluation on the socioeconomic impact childhood obesity has in Tennessee and its short and long-term effects. And we are required to report our findings and recommendations no later than January 31st, 2023. And the report's recommendations remain unchanged from the draft report, with the exception of the strengthening language that was requested at the last meeting. I'm going to give some background leading to the first recommendation. Funding for the Tennessee Department of Education's Coordinated School Health Program, CSH, which has not been increased since 2007, was not calculated as part of the K-12 funding formula used through the 2022-23 school year, which we're currently in. The Basic Education Program, or BEP, Recognizing the importance of the CSH program and its funding, the CSH is included in the base funding amount of the new Tennessee Investment in Student Achievement, or TISA, which the state will begin to use to calculate K-12 funding in school year 23-24. However, currently available information about TISA does not show the amount of state funds each district will receive for CSH. And this brings me to the first recommendation. Given that research supports the importance of coordinated, collaborative efforts in addressing childhood obesity, the Commission recommends the General Assembly ensure each district receives at least the same amount of state funds for CSH under TISA than before it. The next section doesn't lead to a formal recommendation. It leads to an encouragement, but I'll give you the background on that. Studies have found evidence of declining rates of obesity for children participating in Women, Infants, and Children program going against national trends. The national rate for preschoolers rose over the same period, and this puts preschool children participating in WIC on par with the overall national rate, which includes higher income children. In 2019, 43.6% of eligible Tennesseans participated in the program, below the national average of 57.4% and below the rate of some of our neighboring states. Although no data are available showing how effective its current efforts to increase participation are, the Commission encourages the Tennessee Department of Health to continue trying to increase participation in Tennessee's Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for women, infants, and children. The next recommendation is related to Public Chapter 373, which created the Chronic Weight Management Task Force last year in 2021, and they were tasked with studying the health implications of chronic weight management and type 2 diabetes. The task force held 4 public hearings with public health experts and is required to report its findings and recommendations to the General Assembly no later than mid-January 2023. And this brings the next recommendation. Even though the focus was not limited to childhood obesity, the Commission recommends the Administration and General Assembly strongly consider the recommendations of the Chronic Weight Management Task Force, given their medical expertise, and focus on improving treatment options for obesity. And the background for the last recommendation is both the Centers for Disease Control, or CDC, and the Health and Medicine Division of the National Academies recommend multi-level strategies to develop environments and policies that support healthy eating and physical activity across a range of settings, including schools, work sites, communities, and healthcare. This brings up the last recommendation, which is somewhat lengthy, and thank you for your patience. Given the consensus on the importance of multi-level strategies, the Commission recommends that the state adopt a data-driven and community-level 3-step approach to further address childhood obesity. The first step would be to collect the appropriate community-level data, most of which is not yet available. The Tennessee Livability Collaborative, a working group of approximately 20 state agencies with a mission of improving the prosperity, quality of life, and health of Tennesseans, is already working on collecting a set of 120 community indicators, many of which, such as access to parks and recreation and food insecurity, are relevant to childhood obesity. The collaborative can add more indicators relevant to childhood obesity. Agencies participating in the collaborative already work together to coordinate state efforts to solve difficult problems. The collaborative is supported by Tennessee Department of Health staff, and the Department of Health is willing to further coordinate state efforts to target childhood obesity through the collaborative. The second step would be to analyze and evaluate the data, including examining how different demographics are affected by childhood obesity. The Office of Evidence and Impact in the Tennessee Department of Finance and Administration, which promotes and facilitates data sharing among departments to gather deeper insights about program outcomes, identify gaps in state services, and inform intelligent policy design, would be particularly helpful with this kind of analysis. OEI is willing to support TOH and the Livability Collaborative. The third step is for the state to use insights from the data to create pilot programs in communities with high rates of childhood obesity to test the effectiveness of these programs. If a local community does then slow or even halt the growth in its rate of childhood obesity, that local data would allow the state to evaluate more precisely which efforts are leading to the positive change, and state officials could then consider taking the initiatives statewide. This data-driven community approach would be a new direction for the state on this issue, and the Livability Collaborative and OEI are willing to work closely with other Tennessee state departments to find out what is working to improve childhood obesity at the community level. However, even if successful, it is likely that halting and reversing the trend at the state level will take time and require efforts across multiple administrations. And I look forward to your questions and comments and request your approval of the report pending said comments and questions.
Yeah, I want to jump back first to the CSH program you were talking about, that kind of stuff. And it looks like the last information we have or data that we have was from.
I'm sorry, Chairman, could you?
I'm sorry. It looks like the last information that we got, or data we got, was in 2019, and that was with that 43.6% of the eligible. And I'm just concerned why we not done that. Did we not collect data because of COVID, or why is 2019 the last time we have information here?
Okay, the specifically with the coordinated school health report on the BMI data, is that what we're?
Yes.
Okay, that was the most recent report that Department of Health and Department of Education working together had presented. It's conceivable and it could have come out in the last, couple of weeks, but I'm not aware of it. And that was just what had been put together by Department of Health based on the data provided by Coordinated School Health. And I would have to defer to them. We actually do have a representative from Department of Health, at least one in the room, but that's not something that they're responsible for.
Chairman?
Okay, I just don't want to be making decisions 3 years behind on anything that we would do there. The other thing, the collaborative that you were talking about, is this an organization, or would this be a board, or what would make up the collaborative, and who
Sure.
would make it up?
Sure, and I'll be happy to answer that. If you want further detail, a person who's integral in coordinating the collaborative with the Department of Health, who kind of leads it. It is a voluntary organization, voluntary in the sense that, your commissioner may ask you to participate on it, but it is a voluntary group of representatives from the 20 departments who work together, and the Department of Health staffs it, but it is something that they felt like it was a good thing for the state, and they're moving forward with it. It's supported by the Department of Health, but it is not a statutory group. It is a voluntary group, and I would probably defer to the representative if you want more details about.
Okay, maybe I asked the question wrong, but let me get back to what I'm really looking for. Would this be another created department under the Department of Health that would oversee this, or any other government agency?
No, the idea here is that the problem, it's not that there hasn't been a lot of effort to address childhood obesity by state government and the General Assembly. There have been tremendous efforts by state departments and the General Assembly to address childhood obesity. And yet we find ourselves still with a trend going in the wrong direction in spite of all this work. One could argue, I can't prove, but one could argue that things would be even worse without all the work that's been done. The collaborative is a voluntary organization. It is not a creation of a new, it's not a new layer of bureaucracy. It's people who really want to work in an interdepartmental fashion and interdisciplinary fashion to try to solve difficult problems for Tennessee, because a lot of the problems actually across disciplines, go across departments, but it's not creating an additional level of bureaucracy. It hasn't been statutorily created. And I think that's about the limit of what I can say about it without deferring to the person from the Department of Health who's here today, if you would like him to be recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I guess maybe I should get with them and have some more discussion, but, you know, we've been fighting the war on drugs since the 70s, and if you look at the data today, we're still going, as you said, the wrong direction. So I just don't want to be creating another department, organization, all the red tape that goes along with that, instead of spending that time and money and effort towards actually helping these kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Mayor, you're recognized.
A real quick question. The 120 community indicators, is that list completed yet, or
Yes, that list is completed.
is there any way we could get, I'd like to have a copy of that just to lay eyes on it.
Yes, I will request that list of community indicators, and we will provide it to the commission members.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mayor Bradshaw. Any other comments, questions, inquiries from the commission? This is a final report as presented by Mr. Lewis. We have a proper motion, and it's been properly seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Adopt the report. Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Lewis.
Chairman and Commission.
Takes us to tab number 5, which is also a final report, which will require a vote. Electric vehicles and other issues affecting road and highway funding. Final report for approval from Mr. Bob Moreo. Thank you, sir. We look forward to hearing your report.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, and good afternoon, Commissioners. Pleased to present the Commission's report on electric vehicles and other issues affecting road and highway funding for your approval, again located in tab 5 in your docket books. I'll begin by noting a few items added to the report since the draft was presented at our September meeting. Some of these will be highlighted in your copies of the report and in the PDF posted online. At that meeting, Mayor Bickers raised the question of whether the pace of electric vehicle adoption in Tennessee could increase faster than the projections we'd given in the draft report. The final report remains focused on the projections that we based on 3.5 years of actual EV registration data that we obtained from the Department of Revenue. We have added some additional projections that are based on auto industry analysts' forecasts and what could happen if EV sales in Tennessee catch up to those higher targets. Figure 8 on page 22 of the report has a graph showing the EV sales in the U.S. reaching 30% of new vehicle sales in the year 2030, which we then extended to reach 50% of sales in the year 2040. Notice that the graph shows EVs capturing 7% of U.S. vehicle sales next year in 2023. For comparison, if you flip back to figure 7 on the previous page, EV sales in Tennessee right now are at around 4% of sales. However, as the report points out, because increases in fuel economy and the effects of inflation are the main factors that will affect the state's ability to pay for roads in future years, adding greater numbers of EVs doesn't lead to vastly different projections than those based on our existing trends. If you turn to the highlighted paragraph on page 5 of the report, you see that our trend projection shows a net revenue loss from EVs and increased fuel economy combined of $121 million in 2030 before adjusting for inflation, and $212 million in 2040. Using higher numbers of EV sales, those figures increase to $130 million and $240 million respectively. So a small increase. If you could turn to page 43 of the final report. When the draft was presented in September, Mayor Frank asked whether the state had any existing taxes on electricity. And Mayor Bickers also asked whether EV drivers pay any taxes on electricity used when they use charging stations in Tennessee. To help address those questions, we added some details here about the 3 states that have enacted taxes on electricity for EV charging and examples of how much revenue that might create. Also on pages 27 through 30, we added more information about how TVA is planning and preparing for the increased demand on the power grid as vehicle charging needs increase. And the last major addition can be found on pages 46 and 47, where we provided information that was asked for about the electrification of agricultural and industrial and other types of equipment. But overall, the recommendations made in the draft report remain the same in this final report, and they begin on page 7. We did, however, add to and strengthen the first recommendation somewhat. Because the practical effect of the state's EV registration fee is to serve as a substitute for the gas tax by collecting revenue for road funding for vehicle owners who don't purchase gasoline and are not contributing to road funding through the gas tax, the first part of the Commission's revised first recommendation is that the state increase the EV registration fee to better offset the revenue loss from state fuel taxes that those vehicle owners do not pay. Just a few weeks ago, Governor Lee and TDOT announced an infrastructure proposal to address challenges the state is facing to meet its growing roadway needs. Among the proposed solutions was a plan to, quote, create parity between combustion engine drivers and electric vehicle drivers. To achieve that parity, there has been some discussion that the $100 EV registration fee could be raised to $300. The Commission's recommendation in this report is only that the fee should be increased to better offset the lost revenue. Continuing with the first recommendation, Part B says that because the EV registration fee acts as a substitute for the lost fuel tax revenue, the state should share revenue from the EV registration fees with local governments in the same proportion as the gas tax. 55% of revenue local governments use for road funding comes from state-shared fuel taxes, and if a growing share of revenue shifts from gas tax to EV fees, local governments will be disproportionately affected. We added Table 1 on page 4 of the report that shows how offsetting the foregone gas tax revenue with registration fees affects each level of government. Lastly, Part C of the first recommendation is for the state to apply a reduced EV registration fee to plug-in hybrid vehicles and also share that revenue with local governments in the same proportion as the gas tax. Because these vehicles are capable of operating at least some of the time on battery power alone, we estimate that owners of plug-in hybrid EVs pay around $61 on average in annual gas taxes to the state, which is some but less than the $153 average calculated for all vehicles. The report's second recommendation is unchanged. Given the significant effect of inflation on the purchasing power of gas tax revenue, the Commission recommends that the Department of Revenue or another entity inform the General Assembly of the effects of inflation on the purchasing power of the state's fuel tax revenue at least once every 2 years. The third and final recommendation is also unchanged since the draft. As the state confronts these trade-offs associated with any potential alternatives to its current fuel tax-based road funding framework, the Commission recommends the state balance the ability to raise adequate revenue with equity for all drivers, regardless of whether their vehicles are powered by gas, electricity, or some other method. Ensure that revenue from any adopted alternatives is shared with local governments in an equivalent manner to the current sharing of fuel taxes, and ensure that any alternatives intended to offset lost revenues are designed to do so without discouraging customers from purchasing electric vehicles. Thank you all for your discussion, your feedback on the draft report. I'm happy to answer any questions you have at this time. Otherwise, ask for your approval of this final report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morio. Thank you for the report. Thank you for the update since our September meeting. I'm pleased to see all of those. Any comments? Chairman Williams.
Thank you. Thank you for this hard work. I think this is something we're going to have a discussion about just about at every committee meeting at CHB for the next 5 months. But I do have a question as it relates to shared revenues with locals, and this is kind of something I'm dealing with on a completely different matter. In TCA 8-21701, paragraph 7, it talks about that the county clerks are able to collect a 5% fee on any monies that they do collect. I guess my question to you would be, do you feel like if that be the case in collecting registration fees, would that not be an appropriate vehicle since it's already a part of the TCA for them to collect a percentage for the locals of a revised set of numbers for EVs or hybrids?
I guess not having looked at that section of that statute specifically, I'm not entirely sure.
Okay.
Just that the percentage that the gas tax gets distributed is roughly 60% state, 25% county, and 13% city. So whatever the means of separating the EV registration fee into something similar would be what we recommended.
Okay, well, the legislature last year also passed a fee change for locals as it related to those registration fees. If we're going to collect them at the point of registration, which sounds like we're currently doing, which is the best way to do it, seems like that we would take all those into consideration, the local fee collected, the percentage spelled out in the TCA, and the other. I guess follow-up question would be, of course, we've seen the governor's proposal as it relates to what they're proposing to do as far as roads are concerned. And I noticed in the contents of the report, it does talk about formularies to try to figure out what would be a fair number if we were going to replace the lost revenue from, say, the Williams family trading a combustion engine car in for an electric vehicle. Why would the TACIR not want to make an actual numerical recommendation as is a part of their recommendation for each of these two categories? Did you consider it, or did you feel like it best left up maybe to the legislature?
I think, making the decision as far as what the appropriate amount should be, is something that would be worked out through the legislative process, through whatever policies are desired. I think what we tried to do with the report is just present information, say, here's what miles driven, what fuel economy is doing. Just give that information and hopefully facilitate those decisions to be made.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Follow-up, Director?
And I just would add that, and Bob's answer is absolutely correct. And part of that is because there are policy decisions that have to be made on how you calculate that amount. For example, when we were doing our estimates on what a number might be, we didn't include the federal taxes paid, and I know the estimates that are being prepared by the administration do include those. So those are the kinds of things that we think will probably work themselves out in the legislative process.
Chairman?
Thank you, Chairman. I completely agree with that. I think one of the things that's really nice, though, about TACIR is you have a cross-section of all levels of local, state, and county government. And I know as a member of this committee and also a member of the General Assembly, they take into consideration what TACIR says more so than I think a lot of the members or staff may think they did. And so if that be the case, it might have been beneficial really to at least bracket a numerical value based upon the state or local. But that then it gives us something to point at that's not a governmental agency or an individual person that's saying, this is what we want, because TACIR has done a fairly good job over the years of being independent from any of the bureaucracy of government.
Director?
And we would, Chairman, we'd consider that a friendly amendment if you wanted to move approval of the report with that information included. We have the information. We could put a range in there just to give some numbers, some planning numbers. And that range would probably be from our lower end number up to the estimate that the administration has already provided.
Okay, I see a couple other hands. I think for the opportunity to have the other members discuss, I think I'll hold on a motion at this point.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Representative Crawford?
Before you made the motion, I wanted to ask a question. I haven't found anything in here. But would this be a flat rate as far as for all vehicles, or would it be broke down in what we do now as far as commercial vehicles versus, just regular vehicles?
This would just be a modification, a revision of the EV registration fee that's $100 right now is just an additional fee that applies to only electric vehicles, only fully battery-powered electric vehicles at this point. So we're recommending that number be revisited to better reflect the tax revenue that those vehicles aren't collecting, and then also coming up with a number that would apply to plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. But just just those additional fees that are separate from the rest of the vehicle registration fee schedule.
I think legislatively, as you said, we'll be dealing with this a lot this year. I think we need to take that into consideration as well. Would we have a different rate for commercial vehicles as well as the other? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the commission? Chairman Williams, you had an
Thank
earlier
you. I
motion.
think because I don't know what the numbers are, like your staff does, but I would make a motion to adopt the report with the caveat that we would at least provide a plus or minus 5% range of what TACIR's calculations would be as it relates to a rate for each of the vehicles. Is that a fair enough
That's fair.
motion?
That's a fair motion.
Okay.
And that is an appropriate motion. And it does require a second. I have a second from Representative Crawford. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Passes. Thank you for that report. Thank you for that hard work.
Thank you very much.
Now takes us to tab number 6, which is Public Chapter 497, Acts of 2021 Water Recreation Resources. This is a final report for approval from Ms. Jennifer Berry. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I am presenting the final report addressing management of Tennessee's public waterways for recreation for your approval. We prepared the report in response to Public Chapter 497, Acts of 2021, which directs the Commission to study 10 questions addressing the procedural and financial measures necessary to accommodate the evolving recreational use of the state's waterways. The Commission is required to report its findings and recommendations no later than December 31st, 2022. First, I want to mention that in response to a request from Vice Chairman Brooks at the last meeting, on page 16 of the report, we added information about private boat accesses. We found out of 34 commercial paddlecraft outfitters that reported data to TWRA as of October 2022, 11 said they use accesses owned and managed by private entities rather than public ones. Next, since the draft report was presented at the last meeting, staff received input from the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, TWRA, the Tennessee Paddle Sports Association, and also joint input from several groups. And I want to clarify that all the memo lists 3 groups that submitted this joint input. It was actually a broad coalition of over 15 paddling groups, schools, individual instructors, other groups across the state, and one national organization. Considering the stakeholders' feedback, we've revised the language in 2 of the recommendations and added some information throughout the report to reflect their input. The stakeholders' written comments are included in your doc book after the memo, and the changes we made to the report are highlighted yellow. I would like to take a couple minutes to briefly explain the changes we made to the recommendations, which start on page 7 of the report. First, staff changed the language leading into the recommendations from saying state agencies with jurisdiction over public waterways in Tennessee to simply saying the state, to include any state entity that could potentially be involved with carrying out the recommendations. Next, acknowledging the validity of a concern from the Tennessee Paddle Sports Association, we revised language in the second recommendation from suggesting that the existing Commercial Paddlecraft Advisory Committee should be transitioned to a boating advisory board or Office of Outdoor Recreation to saying it could be augmented with one of these entities. The Paddle Sports Association is concerned that the non-motorized outfitters' input could be diluted if the Commercial Paddlecraft Advisory Committee was transitioned to a group with broader interests. Additionally, we revised the language in the final recommendation in response to concerns expressed by TWRA. The recommendation originally said the Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commission should consider including a member of the commercial non-motorized vessel outfitter community. TWRA expressed concern that if they dedicated a seat to a particular interest group, then the Fish and Wildlife Commission, this is a quote, would eventually move to a scenario in which all the 13 seats on the commission are dedicated to a particular special interest, rather than the current, more representative statutory framework of defined demographic and regional representation. End quote. Based on TWRA's input, TACIR staff amended the recommendation to say, additionally, the General Assembly should add motorized and non-motorized boating to the list of subjects in which a Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commissioner should be well informed. This language aligns with the current language in the statute that sets membership qualifications for Fish and Wildlife Commissioners, which says that commissioners should be well informed on the subject of conservation of game animals, birds, and fish. However, because there's a strong argument to make for including representatives of regulated groups on regulatory bodies, TACIR staff notes that including representation of all groups regulated by the Fish and Wildlife Commission, including commercial, boating, fishing, and hunting, is an option. To conclude, I'll briefly recap the revised recommendations. The final report recommends that the state gather more robust data on the recreational use of water resources across the state and use the data for strategic planning. Continue to take a collaborative approach to strategic planning with multiple agencies and consider a statewide task force to address water recreation issues and work through conflicts, which could potentially be accomplished by augmenting the Commercial Paddlecraft Advisory Committee with a permanent statewide boating advisory board with representation and objectives for all effective stakeholder groups, or by establishing a state office of outdoor recreation, and continue to develop existing and new partnerships to improve access to waterways. For example, new relationships between government agencies and nonprofit organizations that are already building and maintaining access areas and doing education and training activities could be developed, and existing partnerships could be strengthened or formalized. Additionally, the General Assembly should add motorized and non-motorized boating to the list of subjects of which a Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commissioner should be well informed. And thank you very much. I'm happy to answer your questions, and I request your approval of this final report.
Thank you, Ms. Berry, for that report. Thank you for those changes from our September meeting and the additional information that you gave us. We have a question, Senator Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. I just wanted to know if anybody representing the coalition that you mentioned is here today, and if so, if we could hear from them, maybe just to see if they feel that this captures the essence of what they were requesting.
Certainly.
Would that be okay?
Certainly. If you could come forward and just identify yourself for the record, thank you.
Hello, my name is Andrea White. I am the ACA, American Canoe Association Southeast Regional Chair. I'm a native Nashvilleian. I've lived in Tennessee for 40 years. I currently live in Atlanta. Please don't hate me. But my family's all still here, and I'm here for the holidays. First, I want to commend the TACIR staff. This is an incredibly complex and fragmented issue, and they've done an incredible job of dissecting it. So I want to first acknowledge what they have accomplished in this report. But in terms of the feedback that our coalition has suggested, we really kind of latched onto and loved the suggestion that the TACIR staff made about creating a state office of outdoor recreation. We think that there's a tremendous opportunity there on multiple layers. And specifically, I mean, if you look at the, I'm gonna have to put my glasses on here. If you look at pages 22 and 23 of this report, it talks about all the governmental agencies that are currently doing regulation, and different rules and fees for users, for tourists, for visitors, for residents, for commercial outfitters, for everyone engaged in these paddle sports. And it is mind-boggling the things people are trying to navigate in the overlapping jurisdictions, right? And if you look at pages 50 through 54, you see two sets of charts that are proposing options for additional regulation. It is a reasonable expectation that what's going to come out of this report is more regulation and more fragmentation and more overlapping kinds of regulation. We feel like there's an opportunity to set this Office of Outdoor Recreation up. We would love to see it in tourist development, because that sets up the incentives from a governmental standpoint and an intergovernmental standpoint for economic development and a user experience to be awesome, for solution finding, rather than regulation or law enforcement, which is what TWRA is excellent at, or service delivery and environmental protection, which is what TDEC is excellent at. It actually creates an office that could be the hub for the rest of the recommendations in this report, that could be the platform for executing what you're trying to accomplish here. I think that is the one tiny piece out of what we suggested that may not have been captured. And I would love to see some version of that added to this final draft. I am happy to answer questions, but I don't feel the need to take up your time if you don't need to
Thank you,
ask
Ms.
it.
White. Are there any questions for the speaker? Thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Berry? Any questions from the commission for Ms. Berry on the final report before we ask for a motion? And is there a motion to accept the final report? So moved. Chairman Williams makes that motion. Is there a second? Second by Senator Lundberg. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. The ayes have it. Final report has been accepted. Thank you, Ms. Berry, for your work.
Thank you very much.
Director Lippert, it would appear that we have exhausted the first 6 tabs of our 1 p.m. called meeting today. I will ask for your direction as it is 2:07.
Mr. Chair, we are scheduled to reconvene in here at 8:30 tomorrow morning. Members can leave their books, which I think is probably a good thing. You might need a forklift to move them, and unless there's any other business.
Any other comments or questions from the commission before we adjourn for the afternoon? Thank you for being here. We're adjourned.